Welcome to the Indian Newsling podcast by Venu Menon.
Professor J L Shaw is a distinguished academic who taught philosophy at the Victoria University of Wellington for 42 years. Before moving to Wellington, Professor Shaw taught at the universities of Hawaii and Alabama in the US. Prior to moving to the US, he taught at Jadavpur University in West Bengal in India. Professor Shaw says he has been interested in Indian philosophy from the age of 10. He is a strong proponent of the Nyaya school of philosophy. Professor Shaw is currently leading a 2-month workshop at the Indian High Commission in Wellington on the relevance of Indian philosophy to contemporary Western philosophy. He answered questions posed to him by Indian Newsling. Let me ask you, Professor, now how does Nyaya tradition or Indian philosophy resolve this particular dilemma, which was part of Plato, I think, where you see a table, you see 3 legs, but you don't see the 4th leg. So does that leg exist or not?
Nyaya claims that if you perceive a branch of a tree, if you perceive the front of the table, then you perceive also the table, whole table. Why? If you claim this is Western philosophy, it is an argument against the Western philosophers, that if you perceive a part, then you perceive the whole also. If you claim that you cannot perceive the whole, then they got a reductio absurdum argument. That argument is, when you perceive, if you do not perceive the whole table, you perceive the front of the table. Front of the table has got parts. So, do you perceive a part of that part? If you say, yes, I perceive a part of the part, then you go on and on, then it is reduced to atoms. And atoms are not perceivable.
So you have to assume the 3rd leg.
That's right. So Western philosophers, by this argument, have not succeeded in establishing that you perceive the table.
The 4th leg.
Yes. So
that Plato's dilemma remains a dilemma in Western philosophy.
That's right.
But it has been resolved by Indian philosophy.
By Nyaya philosophers, that when we perceive a part, we perceive the whole.
You should assume the whole. Is that because of memory of the 4th leg?
No, because you know what sort of object it is.
Belongs to a family of objects.
You know what sort of table will be. Like it has 4 legs, and similarly, when you see the front side of the building, you come to know it is related to the whole.
So does anything have a truly objective existence outside your perception?
Yes. Nyaya is a realist in that sense that objects exist outside our mind. Only some objects do not exist only some objects exist so long as you are perceiving it. But most of the objects in the world exist outside our mind. So, in Western philosophy, we have realism and idealism. Idealism emphasizes that objects are our ideas in the mind. But realism emphasizes that objects are in the world. They are independent of my seeing, touching, they are independent. Now, the Nyaya realists, in order to explain numbers, greater than 2, greater than 1, as well as in order to explain relative sentences like Varanasi is nearer to Calcutta than Delhi. It is relative term. You see this building and you say it is not tall. And another person sees the same building, says tall. It is relative. And Western philosophers have not yet succeeded in substantiating this relative. Nyaya philosophers claim that both of them are right. The person who says it is a tall building, he has not seen tall buildings of New York. He has seen only 4-storied, 5-storied buildings, and 5 stories building, he says it is a tall building because he is comparing 2-storied building with 5-storied building. And the person who has been to New York and he has seen 30-storied building, and when he saw 5-storied building, he says it is not tall because he has got the idea of 30-storied building. So he is comparing. And according to Nyaya, both of them are right because one is comparing with 2-storied building, one is comparing with 30-storied building. So your cognition is also right, my cognition is also right. So relative means it is relative to your previous cognition. And Western philosophers are still arguing about it. So it is a great contribution of Nyaya philosophy. So Nyaya philosophy can add new dimension to Western philosophy in several directions. One is in the case of sources of knowledge. Secondly, they do not have contradictory propositions. In Western philosophy, in Western logic, it is raining and not raining. Premise, conclusion is 2 plus 2 is 4. But not in Nyaya logic, because it emphasizes relevance. So it does not use contradictory propositions in logic. Even in Aristotle, we have contradictory propositions. In the Aristotelian syllogism, you can use contradiction, and it is mentioned by a great logician, Polish logician, more than 100 years ago. He wrote a paper, Lukasiewicz, The Law of Contradiction in Aristotle. It is a masterpiece, nearly 20 pages paper. He has reformulated and he has approached and criticized also Aristotle. So in that sense, there is improvement in the Nyaya logic. Moreover, they have discussed like false perception. Indian philosophy got so many books on false perception. Different systems have different views. They call it Khyatibada. Nyaya is called Annatha Khyati. Annatha Khyati means it has been perceived elsewhere. It is real. It has been perceived elsewhere. But this type of debate is not present in Western philosophy. Similarly, truth. Western philosophers claim, when I say there is a table in this room, it corresponds to proposition. So they postulate a proposition, and there are so many views about proposition. But the Nyaya philosophers do not accept any tertiary entity, only physical objects in the world as well as mental objects. But cognition or mind, but not tertiary entities like images, concepts, ideas, and propositions. So, in that sense, it is simpler than Western philosophy in that direction. They explain everything in terms of two entities. One is physical entity, another is mental cognition.
Thank you for listening to the Indian Newsling podcast by Venu Menon.